Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from the Frontier. Thank you for stopping by. I do appreciate it. My home thoughts start with a photograph I took at 6:56 p.m. yesterday evening. And I tweeted, "Gunmetal blue, this is Nairobi evening and a sliver of the moon." And it's very difficult to find the moon because it was really a sliver. And it reminded me of that passage from Karen Blixen, except the scene I was looking at was in the evening, and the scene I'm about to read to you she's describing is in the morning. But then I thought to myself, it's the beginning and the end of the day are very similar in some respects. This piece from Karen Blixen, it's out of Africa, page 196 in the book I've got, and it felt like this in the evening. The early morning air of the African highlands is of such a tangible coldness and freshness that time after time the same fancy there comes back to you. You are not on earth, but in dark, deep waters. You see what I mean when you see the colours in that photograph I took, going ahead along the bottom of the sea. It is not even certain that you are moving at all. The flows of chilliness against your face may be the deep-sea currents, and your car, like some sluggish electric fish, may be sitting steadily upon the bottom of the sea, staring in front of her with the glaring eyes of her lamps and letting the submarine life pass by here. The stars are so large because they are not real stars, but reflections shimmering upon the surface of the water. Alongside your path on the sea bottom, live things darker than their surroundings keep on appearing, jumping up and sweeping into the long grass. As crabs and beach fleas will make their way into the sand, the lights get clearer, and about sunrise the sea bottom lifts itself towards the surface, a new created island. Worlds of smells drift quickly past you, fresh rank smells of the olive bushes, the brine scent of burnt grass, and a sudden quelling smell of decay. Put up a photograph of Karen Blixen, and I've also been reading Michael Ondaatje, who I hadn't read for a while, and then I realised there was one book of his which I'd never read at all, called O'Neill's Ghost. He's such a luminous writer, taking you from the very commonplace to the uncommon very easily. Two quotes from O'Neill's Ghost. "I wanted to find one law to cover all of living. I found fear. Secrets turn powerless in the open air." According to the Guardian, a supervoid has been discovered, a spherical blob 1.8 billion light years across that is distinguished by its unusual emptiness. Istan Sapudi, who led the work at the University of Hawaii, described the object as possibly the largest individual structure ever identified by humanity. Its existence only emerged thanks to a targeted astronomical survey which confirmed that around 10,000 galaxies were missing from this part of the sky it sits in. Political reflections, the Times of India tweeted Xi Jinping in Pakistan, China to beat US spending there with $46 billion investment. You can see why the Pakistanis are very excited. He also urged China and Pakistan to deepen military cooperation in joint exercises and training. This $46 billion investment plan, very grand, but it's all about Gwadar, the port of Gwadar. And I'll put up an image of what these investments are from the Wall Street Journal, and have a look at where Gwadar is, and you'll see Gwadar is a breakthrough with respect to the act of encirclement that China believes it's facing. France 24, Boston bomber back in court, prosecution demands death. And these personalities on the fringes of the 21st century, quite often occupying two very different cultures are really, seem to me um, the sort of talent pool for these kinds of acts of terrorism. Noon Arabia tweeted photos of the massive airstrike explosion in southeast Sana'a today and its aftermath causing death and destruction. Hiroshima of Yemen was how Rami Lola called it, enormous explosion rocked Sana'a a few minutes ago. And we learnt that the USS Theodore Roosevelt, an aircraft carrier, is steaming towards Yemeni waters now, potentially to intercept suspected Iranian arms shipments to the Houthi rebels. I'm not convinced that this is going to end well at all. Raining air power down on a bunch of guerrillas operating in terrain they understand whilst they wait for boots to be inserted on the ground seems to be what the strategy is in essence. Currency markets, euro around 107.20, took a hit after public sector entities in Greece were ordered to transfer idle reserves to the central bank to help alleviate a cash squeeze. Dollar index above 98.07, Japanese yen around the 119.50 level. Dollars bouncing from a 4-week low of 118.825 overnight. Swissy 0.9573, pound 148.84. That's come off considerably since topping 150. Not too recently. Well, quite recently. Aussie 0.7695. The Reserve Bank of Australia Governor Glenn Stevens said he expects the currency to fall further, so do I. India rupee 63.075, South Korean won 1083.79. Rial has been hanging in there at 303.27. Egyptian pound 763.16 and the rand 1214.22. I'll put up a 3-month chart of the dollar index, and as you know, I'm very bullish about the dollar. But there is a couple of interesting points that I've got to take account of. Officials in March predicted the funds rate would be 1 7/8% by the end of 2016 and 3.125% by the end of 2017. However, if you look at the euro-dollar futures, rates will barely move above 1% by the end of 2016 and will still be under 2% 12 months later. Which is interesting. Euro dollar, as I said, around the 107.20 level. I'll put up a 3-month chart. I still think we're going to 0.93. Greek bonds looking uglier and uglier. The Greek sovereign bond yield curve inverted. Yields on shorter dated debt have become higher than yields on longer bonds. Shorter term bonds took another leg higher following the election in January that saw Syriza take power. I think they're around 28% now. Gold 1194.995 when I checked last, now solidly below 1200. Crude oil, I'll put up a 5-day chart, have a look at that. $57.78. Had a strong rally, but I think it's going to run out of steam now. Interesting article about the world of precious stones and rubies in particular in Bloomberg. Ian Harbottle, who made his career from mining coloured gemstones, has an emerald the size of a pineapple locked away in a safe. He's not sold the unique bright green rock because it's so rare nobody really knows its worth. Welcome to the topsy-turvy world of coloured gems where abundance can mean higher prices and scarcity makes spectacular stones untradeable. Very different business from diamonds, the world's most popular precious stone, traded in a liquid global market that makes pricing relatively transparent. For coloured stones, prices often increase with supply as jewelers acquire enough stock to justify marketing the gems to customers. Take regular emeralds, their value has appreciated 1,000% in 5 years, as Hairbottle's Gemfields plc and peers expanded mines, while marketing campaigns fronted by Hollywood star Mila Kunis gave demand a boost. Now Hairbottle wants to bring the same game to rubies. Gemfields Montepuez in Mozambique, estimated to contain as much as 40% of the world's known supply of the deep red stones, could triple output from 8 million carats targeted for this year, according to the executive. Potential rewards are compelling, At its first Singapore auction last December, Gemsfields sold high-quality rubies for an average $689 a carat, dwarfing the $66 a carat for comparable emeralds. Rising demand in China. With the rubies, there is a fairly healthy uplift potential. Over the next couple of years, we should be able to double prices. 20% of the emerald market, and they're looking to replicate that in rubies. Very interesting. Moving on to sub-Saharan Africa, at least 5 were shot during Guinea opposition protests. This is a continuing story. And I spoke about the risks in my article last year. Ouagadougou's signal to sub-Saharan Africa. You've got to tread very carefully now in these circumstances. And my article over the weekend was Sub-Saharan Africa tilted to the downside. If you haven't had a look at that, it's on Rich Wrap-Ups and on the front page. More very interesting story. Mauritius Ponzi probe risks extending Africa's worst stocks rout. A sell-off that made Mauritius equities the worst performers in Africa this year risks deepening as a probe into an alleged Ponzi scheme involving one of the Indian Ocean Islands' banks and insurers damp investor sentiment. The overall sentiment is more on the downside. It's a hit for our financial services industry. A bank went bust, and the largest life insurer is also out. The regulator revoked the license of British-American investment company's Brahma Banking Corporation on April the 2nd and placed its insurance unit, BAICO, into administration, with Prime Minister Anirudh Jugnauth saying there is evidence of links to a $690 million Ponzi scheme and the lender risked depositors' funds. Events threatened to undermine efforts by Mauritius to position itself as a regional hub for financial services. Stock exchange of Mauritius's benchmark Semdex index has dropped for a record 6 straight months, down 6.3% this year. Rupee retreated 12% this year against the dollar, worst perform on the continent after the Cedi and the Kwacha. Bank of Mauritius Governor Ramesh Basant Roy was attending the IMF and World Bank meetings in Washington and couldn't immediately respond to questions. Calls to British American investment weren't answered. So basically, a massive story over there. And essentially, it is creating contagion over here because the fellow, the promoter of this bank, is the largest shareholder in British American investment in Britain here. So the insurance regulatory authorities probing 2 Britam directors over bank collapse. Sammy McCovey, the IRA chief executive, said the outcome of the investigations may force Rawat, Britam's largest owner, to sell his stake in the Kenyan firm. Mr. McCovey said that if Mr. Rawat is linked to the Ponzi scheme, the authority would, as required by law, disqualify him from holding an office in Britam. Britam fell yesterday in price. It's down 17.64% year to date and probably got more to test to the downside. Kamuhinda said in the 1970s Africa accounted for 4.99% of world trade, East Asia 2.25%. By 2010 we were at 3.33%, East Asia soared to 17.8%. Mail and Guardian have a very interesting piece, infographic, South African firms big in rest of Africa, xenophobic attacks don't make dollars cents. Just 5 ShopRite stores in Angola sell more cans of energy drink Red Bull than all of ShopRite's 382 stores in South Africa. Think about that, pretty remarkable, isn't it? Zulu King Goodwill Zwelithini has appealed for calm after recent violence against migrants in South Africa. King Goodwill Zwelithini told about 10,000 people in Durban, the epicenter of the crisis, that if he had given an order to kill foreigners, this country would be reduced to ashes. Gassa said the entire speech of King Goodwill Zwelithini was aimed at explaining himself, incredibly defensive and also provocative. when he said, if it were true that I sparked the xenophobic violence, this country would have been reduced to ashes. There's a threat there. He says, I can command with my mouth. I can command a scorched earth policy of practice. And I choose not to. KZN provincial government on Twitter tweeted His Majesty King Goodwill Zwelithini arriving at the Stadium. Apparently, the crowd booed non-Zulu speakers. The situation remains one which is not under control. South African all-share, however, has bounded higher this year. It's up 9.67% year to date and not far off a record high. Dollar rand 12.1422. Egyptian pound 763.16. The Egyptian EGX 30 index is down 2.75% year to date, and it's retreated 14.435% since closing at a 2015 high on February the 4th. The Nigerian all-share is up 2.79% year to date and has bounced 25.901% since February the 13th, when admittedly it closed at a 2-year low. Ghana Stock Exchange is down 0.41%, but obviously the IMF have stepped in there, as we know. Safaricom closed yesterday at a record for the second consecutive session. It's up 22.775% this year, and it's now trading on a trailing price earnings ratio of 30.263. Full year results to be issued May 7th. Looking forward to my interview with Bob on that day. So obviously the market getting bullish about that. M-Pesa, which was successfully ported back to Kenya, the servers were at least, remains a jewel in the crown, as I said 1,076 days ago. And if you haven't seen that interview I did after the first half results with Bob, it's a good thing to see, because very bullish in that interview. Nairobi all shares up 6.62% year to date. NSE 20, however, has diverged dramatically. It's down 0.195%. Safaricom closed at a record. Kakuzi, heavy trading of 122,600 shares, has rallied 55.555% so far this year. That's more a story about its diversification. It's not just tea. They've got a big avocado business, but also, I think, about the real estate, because Kakuzi is not too far down out of town. Safaricom successfully ported its M-Pesa service from Germany to Kenya over the weekend, closed at a fresh all-time high of 1725. It was going to push on more buyers and sellers, and traded as high as 1740 during the session. There's a link for the share price data. Kenya Airways rebounded 2.836% off a multi-year low to close at 725. Quite a bit of the bad news is now baked into the price. Could see a positive surprise around the West African routes. KCB, most actively traded share at the Securities Exchange, it's up 12.28% this year and just 1.53% off a record high. Equity Bank has really outperformed KCB this year, and I think that's all about the extra issue of shares. Of course, Britain was unable to escape the Mauritian crossfire, as I said, retreated 2.97%, and it's going to fall further, I think. BAT rebounded 7.68% and become very oversold, and it's bounced 16.124% just over 2 sessions. EABL, which is plus 6.66%, and has its group CEO, Diageo CEO Ivan Menezes, visiting tomorrow. Looking forward to meeting him. That share's up 6.66% and headed higher in my view, because they've really taken a lot of action around the balance sheet, sold off non-core assets, reduced debt, refied quite a bit, and I'm bullish about the opportunity and about their ability to sort of steady the ship, tidy it up, and position it for growth.